Good afternoon and welcome to CompanyRoots. Today we're interviewing Ms. Laura Fox, a professor of social entrepreneurship at the USC Marshall School of Business and a guest lecturer at UCLA, and also a generous philanthropist serving on many nonprofits as well as advisory boards.
Mrs. Fox is also a current attorney and a former entertainment industry executive who served as the Vice President of Legal Affairs at Walt Disney Pictures and Touchstone Pictures. Mrs. Fox, it is a privilege and we are truly honored to interview you today.
Well, nice to see you guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
My name is Raul Kavuru. I'm a sophomore at St. Paul School in New Hampshire, and I'm the president of CompanyRoots.
My name is Suresh Jasti. I'm a senior at Homedale High School from Homedale, New Jersey, and I'm the founder of CompanyRoots. And the first question that we had for you today was, what are your company roots and how do they help you in shaping who you are and becoming the person you are today?
Ooh, okay. Do you want me to take it all the way back to like when I was your guys' age?
Of course.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I grew up in Chicago and my entire family was involved in sort of social impact and social change in some way. So my dad was a lawyer, but he also founded a foundation that funded a lot of educational initiatives on the south side of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
My mom worked most of her life for gun control. My sister, even to this day, has always worked in the nonprofit field. So right now she works for NDI, the National Democratic Institute, which is an NGO that literally spreads democracy throughout the world. So my family always had this ethic of really wanting to address social problems. So that was sort of how I became interested in the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for everyone to be successful, we all know that there is a great role model behind it. So who is your inspiration for success and how did they impact you and develop your love for humanity?
Ooh, okay. If you look at the field of sort of like public figures, I think probably a lot of people would say this, but there's so many. I'm a huge fan of Muhammad Yunus, who is obviously somebody who's a role model to a lot of people because he won the Nobel Peace Prize and he was really one of the original thinkers in the area of social entrepreneurship and microfinance, just in the way that he was able to create a model which now has been widely replicated to enable people to lift themselves out of poverty. So, when I first started thinking about this, people talk about philanthropy as kind of the third sector, right? So you have corporations and their charter has always been to make as much money as possible, have a return for their investors. Government, we know how that goes sometimes. And then philanthropy was the third sector, right? Which was sort of like risk capital that went into areas where neither of the other two sectors were really working effectively. So the idea of finding a way to incorporate, sort of a profit-driven or a self-sustaining model into social impact it was one of the things that I think he was one of the really early thinkers in that field.
Right. So right now I'm actually taking a course on corporate social responsibility on edX. So that's kind of playing into what I'm learning there.
Yeah. And how do you, okay, now I just have to ask you, so what do you, because corporate social responsibility is getting a lot of bad press these days. And some people say in a way it's going away because it used to be that, corporations, obviously their first responsibility is to make money, but then they also tried to have some positive social impact by giving the money away. I mean, what people are saying now is doing good, or at least not doing harm, but having a positive social impact should be built into the operations of the company. Right. So what's your feeling about that?
So I'm a pretty strong believer in corporate social responsibility, and that it's like, in order to really have profit maximization, you do need to have like the other sides to it, because like, it's not only about just making the money and the figures, but it's also about like your employees and the benefits they can receive from a corporation being socially responsible. So not only does it like help people feel like they're part of like a company and like go with their mission on like a greater degree, but it also kind of helps you retain employees, do less hiring, and like, going through the whole process of training them. So I think there's like a lot of things beyond just like the numbers you see on the report at the end of the year. So I'm a pretty strong believer in it.
Right. I think that's a good point. I think your generation, and maybe even a generation a little ahead of you, when you're looking for a job or you're consuming a product, this is something now that you're demanding, right? This is not an add-on, this is something that it's of critical importance, as I understand it, to people of your generation, at least understand the footprint, the social footprint of your employer.
Right. Our generations, it's like, we're kind of learning from you know, the beginning of elementary school about how important the environment is and how important, you know, it is to be doing things that you really like. And so I feel like that's kind of the reason why we always want to look for like our dream job is not only doing something we like, but doing it in a way that kind of helps other people.
That's great.
Yeah. So I had a question about on the social impact field in general. So what direction do you think it's going in? Because you've been in it for a while now. And what qualities do you feel the next generation of leaders in this field kind of need?
Ooh, well, let's see. The first part, uh, I'm trying to think whether the answer to that has changed substantially over the last month,
Right.
right? I think that the direction it's going in, as I said, is that there are, I mean, obviously, if you look at actors in the world of social impact, they're sort of across a range of models from, you know, sort of for-profit, profit, market-driven solutions to social problems, all the way over to pure nonprofits, right? And we know what those are. So there's a place for all of those. I think that the field is definitely shifting more in the direction of market-driven solutions. And they may be, it may be a nonprofit model, it may be a for-profit model, it might be a hybrid model of some kind, but I think that's where it's going. There's always going to be a place, I think, for traditional philanthropy. I think as the economy changes, I don't know what it's going to be like, really. I don't think it's going to be like it was in 2008, but where I am in Los Angeles, if you talk to funders, you know, grant makers, they're using the word triage. So, you know, there's sort of an estimation that as many as a third of the local nonprofits that currently exist in our community might not make it through this crisis for a variety of reasons. So I think of necessity, depending on how the economy goes, because it's a little differently structured than it was in '08, but I think of necessity, the ones that are going to emerge are going to be the ones that have a business model that makes them self-sustaining, essentially.
Right.
Yeah. Advice, I mean, at this point, it's you know, the people who I've seen who seem to be doing the best are the ones that really take a step back and they assess the field. They sort of identify the social problem they want to solve, and then they become very reflective about who else is doing it, you know, what the best way is to achieve it. They tend to test the concept, you know, both in terms of the financial model, but also really in terms of impact, you know, asking yourself, am I really achieving the results that I want to achieve? Instead of going into it with a set of assumptions about, you know, sort of theory of change, you have to test that as you go in.
Right.
You know, in this new world, I think the people who are going to be successful are the people who really are able to, at least right now, really reassess on a continual basis, because things are changing for you. If you have a social enterprise, things are changing for your competitors. You know, you don't know where they're going to go, and because you see a lot of businesses pivoting right now.
Yeah, definitely. Just being able to adapt and attack the new problems.
Continually, right? I mean, it's just sped up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you, Ms. Fox, you have served on many nonprofit boards. So how do you describe your impact on some of these nonprofits?
Ooh, okay. This is a a good question. I'm going to give you an honest answer. So if you're thinking about serving on a nonprofit board, I definitely encourage it. I think you always want to make sure that as an individual that you feel like you're actually adding value, and that it's also a growth opportunity for you, but that you know, and that you feel, you know, going back to what I said before, you always have to ask yourself, you know, am I helping the nonprofit achieve its mission? Is the nonprofit achieving its mission? Am I helping with that?
Right.
So you know, I think you always on these, you have to figure out what your skill set is. So because I'm a lawyer, I usually end up, you know, I'm more, you know, sort of like an executor and administrator. So I'm usually the one trying to make sure that the process for everything is as good as it can be. You know, obviously I focus a lot on the finances too, because having been on the business side. So that's what I try to do on these nonprofit boards. I don't know if that answered the question.
Are there any like particular experiences with certain nonprofits or certain companies that you've had that have made you more reflective about the entire industry?
Yeah, I've been on. You mean on the sort of philanthropy sector, on the nonprofits? Yeah. Yeah, I think that you have to. I mean, again, you know, especially for you guys, like everything you do should be a good use of your time. And in addition to doing well for other people, it should be a growth experience for you. So what I have, what I have found is sometimes there are organizations that have great intentions and they have great leadership and they have great people, but they're not really having a great impact. And so I think you have to always in this sector, if you're really going to spend your time and money on something, you have to really distinguish between something that maybe looks good or sounds good and something that really is achieving the kind of change that you're interested in achieving.
Right. Okay. So right now you work on the executive board of Visionary Woman with Miss Angela Nazarian, who in our previous interview we had the pleasure of interviewing too.
Right.
So what is your role within the organization?
Okay. I have, in my view, I have the best role within the organization because, which not everybody would think, right? This is what I meant about finding your niche, right? You don't want to come onto a board and all of you have the same interests and skill set, so everybody wants to do so. So Angela, as you know, is an author and she's kind of a marketing genius. She's also great at curating events. So she has created this really, this fantastic business model. I mean, I know a lot of people who have salon series, but she has, you know, she's talking now about putting together a panel of female Nobel laureates. You know, she had female ambassadors. She has very high level events. And then there are people who really like talking about the event side, right? How do we put it together, right? I'm none of those people. So my role is I chair the grants committee. So last year we gave away probably about $500,000 very quietly to organizations that advance the status of women, either in Los Angeles or in developing countries. So for me, that's really fun. We get the applications, they come into the website, and then about 4 times a year, the committee sits down, we look through them, and then we get to give away money. And that's
awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. That actually kind of touches to the class that you're teaching at USC called it's Philanthropy and Social Impact. And so
yeah.
I read on an article that you actually had like a sit-down conversation with the dean of USC, and you and your husband made a class where you essentially gave away $60,000 to a couple of nonprofits that you let the students choose. So I guess they were kind of role playing there.
Yeah. So that class is, I know I was cringing because I'm just not sure the title really makes sense anymore. But yeah, so the premise for the class started because I'm also involved at UCLA, and it grew out of an initiative that was created by a foundation out of Texas. So that foundation decided we're going to give universities across the country $100,000 and they can create a class that teaches students about philanthropy. So UCLA has that class. It's a great class. The students who take it are really interested in philanthropy, as am I, but I also, you know, we just had this conversation earlier about where the whole field is going. I think the field is going more in the social enterprise area. And I think for people your age to be interested, like the two of you, that's really what you're more interested in. So, and it had to be within kind of it's in the entrepreneurship program and it's at the business school. Yeah. So we sat down with some people at USC and they said, we love the idea of doing this, but it's got to be social entrepreneurship is the focus. And you have to give away money to organizations instead of just nonprofits. They have to be nonprofits that have some earned income stream. So some way that they make money, not just asking people like you for it. So we actually, last year we gave away $85,000. So the students start with a list of 48 local social enterprises from like teeny tiny to maybe up to like a $10 million a year budget. And then they research them and they narrow it down and they, you know, negotiate among themselves. And then ultimately they write proposals and then ultimately they give it away to 3 organizations in a way that will help them grow their earned income stream to become more self-sustaining.
Yeah. Wow.
So how exactly were you able to get in contact with all the guest lecturers for the class?
Oh my God, this is where you start pulling in like every favor you know. So we've had, but we've had like the first year we had Steve Ballmer, who I don't know if you probably know who Steve Ballmer is. He was great. All the way down to this woman, Madeline Frazier, was one of our best guest lecturers. She was on Shark Tank. She's about 26, super dynamic. We really just kind of mined our, you know, family and friends list and called in favors.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what were your personal takeaways from teaching the class? I'm sure, you know, as a student, you have one thing where you're having like all this information coming at you, but as a teacher, you have like a totally different experience about it.
Yeah, these are great questions, by the way. My takeaway, well, first of all, one thing I realized, because obviously I'm not a professional academic, I was basically an entertainment industry business executive,
Mhm.
was that I love working with college students. I think that not your age, but that age slightly older than you, I think had a little bit of a reputation for being, a little entitled, not super respectful. And I found that to be completely wrong. These students are really, really respectful, really engaged. A lot of them, and one of the reasons we teach this class is we don't want to just pick up the people who've already decided like you, like I want to go into social impact. We want to pick up people who think like, okay, this is cool. It's a 2-credit course. I'm
Right.
going to learn a little something. And then by the end of it, they become so really involved with the organizations they're representing and the work that they see being done, that a lot of them, if you follow them, who've now done it 3 years, they continue to either volunteer for the organization or they do something else in social impact. So I guess one thing I realized is there is hope for the world when I see this generation, because they're gonna do good things, as you guys are too. Um, I also think that one of the reasons this class seems to work, at least for the people who do it, is that it's very experiential. So I don't know. I'm actually heard the dean of Wharton is coming over to SC, and I was on seems like fantastic. Sorry, but but yeah, he is coming over. But he was talking about the move toward more learning by doing. So what
Yeah.
we kind of found with these students is, it, not being an academic, I kind of treat them like I might have treated the people in my department when I was their boss. And I kind of find that if I throw the work at them, they figure it out.
Yeah.
As you, right?
That arguably might be like, personally, like a better way to attack it, like experiential learning versus just sitting in a classroom and listening to like a PowerPoint presentation the entire time.
Yeah. I think that's where a lot of this class is. I mean, certainly at a business school, but I think that's where a lot of it's going.
Yeah. So one of your past achievements included serving as the vice president of legal affairs at Disney and Touchstone as well. So what was your transition from kind of becoming a professor to social entrepreneurship?
Ooh, I had a big gap in between. So I was at Disney. So I was in private practice. I was a lawyer in private practice for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a choice of 2 jobs. I was offered a job at a big foundation. And incidentally, one of my friends was also working at Walt Disney Studios and they offered me a job. So at the time, as I said, philanthropy was like a little sleepy kind of profession to have. So I went to entertainment, became the black sheep of my family because everyone else was doing something like for the planet. And I was now, fighting about whether people's makeup artists could fly first class or coach, very meaningful. So yeah, I did that. And then I actually went, following that job, I went over to DreamWorks, which was started by an executive at Disney and 2 other people for a long time. And I did business affairs. So I was on the deal making side, but it was pretty intense, really fun, but it's not a job that can be done really, part-time or when you want to do it or from home. At least it wasn't at that point. So then I had kids, took a lot of time off, but then I was able to do what I really had wanted to do for a long time, but hadn't had time to do, which was to start joining boards. So that's how I kind of got into the social impact side of social entrepreneurship. And then the professor thing happened just by chance. I met a woman who actually just retired from UCLA, and she said, I have this class and we're looking for people to, just come in as like a section leader. Do you want to do it? And
Yeah.
when asked, you should never let fear of like totally sucking and not knowing what you're doing stand in the way. So I said, sure, I'll figure it out by the time I get there. So that's how I made the transition.
Yeah. And I think that definitely like you need the proper skill of networking when you do those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you recommend current high school students to grow their network?
Ooh, okay. That is such a good question. I think, you guys are already doing it, first of all. Like, this is brilliant. I think you have to, and as high school or college, I think you have to take every opportunity you can. So if there's someone who does something that you're like friends, friends, young people you meet, that does something that you're interested in, even if you don't know if it will ever come to something, see if you can get on a call with them or take them out for coffee. And then you guys probably know this already, but follow up, send a note, mention something that they said during the time that you spoke to them. Keep in touch. If they refer you for a job, make sure you immediately send them a note saying, I got the job, thank you, or I didn't get the job, but I really appreciate the introduction. And just make sure you cultivate every relationship you have, make sure you cultivate it as much as you can without being a pest, obviously. And, I guess the other thing I would say is just, at this point in your life, now I sound like I'm talking to my kids, so sorry, but at this point in your life, like you really can't anticipate what people who come in and out of your life are going to be to you later on, and you never know. And so you just want to be sure that you leave everyone with the best relationship, the best impression that you can make. So whatever you're doing for them, do it the best. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah. So we always end our interviews in the same question. What advice would you give to the current generation of high school students who would like to start making a positive impact on society?
Wow. Okay. I think the first thing you have to do is figure out, we already said that I'm a pretty granular process-oriented person. So I think the first thing you need to do is figure out what is the social problem that you want to solve. Mm-hmm. Once you figure out the social problem that you want to solve, then you can go to your process, right? Do you want to join an organization? Do you want to join a junior board? Do you want to volunteer so that you can start to understand more about it? Because you don't understand as much about it as you will if you do a little research, if you volunteer, if you read about it, see what everybody's doing in the field. Right. And if you decide you want to start an organization, then you got to decide, do I care about the purpose more? Do I care about the money more? What kind of organization do I want to start? Can I get charitable contributions, or do I need to make money? Is this going to be my living? Do I need to get a salary from this? Because that's going to look different. So it's basically, you got to go through a really methodical process, right? Mm-hmm. With that said, at some point, you got to pull the trigger on what you want to do. But you don't have, the other advice is, you don't have to do it all or nothing. If you don't go work for a nonprofit after college, that's really fine. There's still going to be plenty of ways for you to make an impact. So you have to look for those. Yeah.
One thing that I thought was pretty interesting was during that course I was taking, they talked about Timberland and how Timberland's a really social, it's a really CSR driven company. And so a lot of their employees are able to work, in the shoe space, obviously, but they also have benefits that are different from regular ones. So you can have paid volunteer hours, and you just choose an organization. And I think it's maybe every 10 or 15 hours you work at an organization, Timberland will donate a certain amount of money, I think.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Or that may have been Salesforce as well. But I remember those two examples because I was even if my skills aren't going directly towards a nonprofit, if you're working for a company that has that type of CSR driven value, then you're already making your impact just by working there.
Right. That is true.
That was pretty cool for me.
I love that.
Yeah.
So today we were able to interview Mrs. Laura Fox. Thank you. And it was an honor and a privilege.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.